Hi, everybody. My name is Hannah. This is Pepper and Pine, and today we're talking about the four temperaments. But we're going to do a little art project to help us understand the four temperaments a little bit better. Now, I've done this a few different ways. This one was with watercolors, and I found that it didn't quite suit my needs. So I have another one here just with paper and color pencils, and we're getting a little bit closer to what I think will be a useful graphic for understanding the four temperaments, but we are going to do it one more way, and I'm going to show you today how to do this so that I hope that you can understand the four temperaments a little bit better. So for this, I do have a few resources. I have Authentic Parenting, a Four Temperaments Guide to Understanding Your Child. This is a fabulous book that is really easy to read with tons of tips. I also have Children and Their Temperaments. This one is a little bit broader in its understanding of the temperaments and the history behind it. Some of the examples are golden. They are such gems, and I really appreciate the graphics that are throughout this book. I also used other resources, and to find a complete list of the resources, you can check the blog post that accompanies this video, where you can find images of these graphics as well as other resources that I used in order to put this together. I'm starting out with a large piece of paper that I have folded into quarters, and I'm using my compass to do 4 circles, one in each of these quadrants. However, the circles are going to overlap a little bit. Now, because I am using a rectangle piece of paper, I am going to adjust these circles once I get the basic shape using my compass. You can do this with a plate or a bowl in order to get a circle, or you can freehand it as well, since we're going to be erasing part of this anyway in order to get the graphic that I really want. So I'm going to start by using my pencil to extend those 2 circles at the top and the bottom so that they overlap. And we want to have these circles overlap because as we study the 4 temperaments, we're going to recognize some traits that are shared between each temperament. And I wanted a graphic that showed those shared qualities so that we can see how the sanguine and the choleric have shared qualities, likewise with the other temperaments. What I was not able to do was figure out a graphic that could show how opposing temperaments had shared qualities. There are a lot of tensions between the temperaments, especially ones on opposite sides, but you'll find that there are also some shared qualities. And I am especially interested in those shared qualities and in the tensions between them. I think it is so insightful to understand that. And as we progress, we will see how those shared qualities are sometimes expressed differently, or their motivations for those shared qualities come from different places. I have my choleric on the upper right side and my sanguine on the upper left side. I'm going to have my melancholic on the lower right side and phlegmatic on the lower left side. Now, if you search for images on the 4 temperaments, you will not see them laid out this way. You will see that melancholic and sanguine are opposite. The reason why I laid them out this way is that the choleric and the sanguine are high energy, and I think of them as up and lifted. The sanguine is the air quality, and the choleric is the fire quality. And both of those, when we're looking at the 4 elements, are higher. They're positioned higher than the water element of the phlegmatic and the earth element of the melancholic. So let's look at the choleric to begin with. We're looking at some of the qualities that the choleric has. And the choleric looks to the future. They are forward thinking. They are not thinking of the present or the past. However, the sanguine is very present thinking, and the melancholic looks to the past. And so you can see these 3 aspects of how one looks at the future or the past. Now, each of them are a little bit different. The sanguine and the choleric share the extroverted quality, while the phlegmatic and the melancholic share the introverted quality. So let's go back up to the choleric, and we can see that they are quick to anger and quick to action. They can become impatient and frustrated. The sanguine, on the other hand, can be untidy as well as forgetful. And this is going to be opposite from the melancholic, who has a deep memory, and the phlegmatic also has a good memory. The sanguine is shallow, while the melancholic is deep. Now, the sanguine is shallow in the connection to the body, shallow in their fleeting emotions. They also have a restless energy, whereas the phlegmatic have low energy, which is actually shared with the melancholic as well. And the choleric has high energy. So here's an energy quality that is distributed among these four temperaments to have low energy or high energy, but the high energy of the sanguine is a restless energy. Let's look at the sanguine and see that they enjoy variety in food, in fashion, in adventure. They want a lot of variety. The phlegmatic and the melancholic tend to be slower. They are reliable. You can see that these are some shared qualities between them. They are deeply loyal versus the sanguine, who is not as loyal and can go from friend to friend, which can really hurt the feelings of a phlegmatic or a melancholic when they go from friend to friend, whereas the phlegmatic and the melancholic are a lot more loyal with their friendships. Phlegmatics do not like interruptions. This is really important to know if you have a phlegmatic student or you yourself are phlegmatic. Irritations from being interrupted are high for the phlegmatic. They also love food and they love eating, whereas the melancholic has a low appetite. And if you just provide them a few options and smaller portions, they're more likely to eat rather than get overwhelmed by their food choices. Together, the melancholic and the phlegmatic are perfectionists. Let's jump back to shared qualities between the sanguine and the choleric. We can see that they are both socially inclined, but their motivations and the outcome of that social inclination will vary between the sanguine and the choleric. They are both charismatic, and the choleric will use that in his leadership qualities, whereas the sanguine will use that in his social influence. So both of them are going to be attracting people in their social circles, but the motivations are going to be different and the outcome is likely to be different as well. Both the sanguine and the choleric are energetic versus the phlegmatic and the melancholic are low energy. Both the sanguine and the choleric are enthusiastic, and that's going to work really well with their temperament in order to achieve the goals that they are looking to achieve. Let's look at some shared qualities between the sanguine and the phlegmatic. Both avoid conflict. However, the sanguine will avoid conflict through charm and humor, whereas the phlegmatic will avoid conflict by being neutral and passive. Both are adaptable and flexible, but that is primarily a sanguine quality, whereas the phlegmatic can be those things, but they do prefer their comfort and their routine. The choleric and the melancholic are both structured and rigid, whereas the sanguine and the phlegmatic avoid high pressure and stress. High pressure is definitely a quality of the choleric. They seem to thrive through that high pressure in order to achieve their goals. They hold themselves highly accountable and they hold others highly accountable as well. They have high values and high expectations. Both sanguines and phlegmatics prefer comfort and they enjoy life. They want to enjoy the things that bring them joy and comfort, For the phlegmatic, that is comfort in their routine and in their food. And in low pressure life, they want to be relaxed. The sanguine looks for comfort and enjoyment in variety, in travel, in things that are a little bit more energetic and varied, but both of them prefer comfort and enjoyment. The phlegmatic may be slow, but they are steady, they are stable, and they are reliable. However, they sometimes need a little bit of encouragement to get started on a project, although once they start, they do see it through really well. Another quality of the phlegmatic is that they don't like to be hurried or pressured. So if they are teamed with a choleric, the choleric may be the inspiration to get started, but very quickly they can become too high pressured if the phlegmatic is too slow, as they don't like to be hurried. And so the choleric will see the phlegmatic as slow, while the phlegmatic will see the choleric as too fast. The sanguine lives in the present. They don't think about the past. They don't think about the future. They really live in the moment. They are adventurous. I did spell that wrong, and I will correct it before I put it in ink. So they like to really live life to the fullest, which can be so helpful as an example to the other temperaments. But when left unchecked, they will have a hard time achieving their goals and staying grounded. One of their biggest assets are how socially aware and connected they are. However, those connections tend to be a little bit shallow. The sanguine also has fleeting emotions because they live in the present. Now, all four temperaments have an emotional quality, and the sanguine is that they can be angry one moment and then quickly forget because they live in the moment and move on from that very quickly, versus the melancholic tends to really sit with their emotions for quite a long time, and they may sit with other people's emotions as they seem to attract or stick with those emotions even when it doesn't belong to them. They can really feel the vibe of a social gathering. Even if the vibe was positive, they may still find those parts of the social gathering that weren't quite right, or they were sensitive to it. So they tend to have sticking emotions, versus the choleric, who is emotionally outward, as opposed to the melancholic, who is emotionally inward, and the phlegmatic, who is emotionally avoidant. So all four have an emotional component, either outward or inward, or fleeting or avoidant. Let's look at some shared qualities between sanguine and choleric. They can be impulsive, more so the sanguine because they live with their intuition and in the moment, whereas the choleric has a strong sense of self, so they can be impulsive because they're quite sure and confident of themselves. The choleric and the melancholic are deep thinkers. However, they ponder and think about different things, whereas the sanguine tends to be a shallow thinker and can be easily aroused, but at the same time can be easily distracted. Both the choleric and the melancholic are goal-oriented, but their goals are quite different. The choleric is thinking about leadership goal-oriented tasks, whereas the melancholic prefers to perfect the skills associated to their craft or to detailed work, and so their goals are going to be different, but they both are goal-oriented and they're both persistent. They really work on things until it's to their liking, and so a melancholic can work on something and even tear it up and start again and do it again and do it again until it is perfect for them, even though the other temperaments might think that it's good enough. If it's not good enough for the melancholic, they will continue to do it over and over again, which means that they can get lost in the details and not see the big picture because they are so focused on getting something just right. The choleric and the sanguine tend to be fast, whereas the phlegmatic and the melancholic tend to be slow. The choleric tends to be competitive, and this can be competitive in all things from games to something fun to something serious. They tend to be competitive and they don't like it if people don't play by the rules. They don't like it if people are not putting their all into a game or into anything. They really want someone to bring everything and really be a good competitor for them. A shared quality between choleric and melancholic is that they can be intense. However, the intensity of the choleric tends to be outward, whereas the intensity for the melancholic tends to be inward. And yet they are both really serious. They take their tasks and their goals seriously, and it shows on their face. You can see the serious depth on a melancholic, and you can see the seriousness on a choleric, so much so that their face might be flushed just because they run so hot. The melancholic prefers to be solitary, and whereas you can find that same quality a little bit with the choleric and the phlegmatic, you'll find that the sanguine prefers to be in the company of others. Even when it comes to doing their schoolwork or tasks at home, they tend to work better when they're in the presence of others, whereas the melancholic and the phlegmatic tend to be more productive when they're by themselves. The melancholic tends to be introspective to the point of examining feelings deeply and examining their feelings associated to social engagements, how someone else made them feel. They can hold grudges even if it wasn't actually something that happened. If they felt it, they will hold grudges. They will remember a long time when someone did something to them that made them feel a particular way. And with that, they can grow through their development as they become adults and later into adulthood. They can start to take that quality and not just think about how others are affecting them, but how they can relate to others emotionally and with compassion. You'll find that the phlegmatic is faithful. You can also find that with the melancholic as well, but you're not going to find that with the sanguine, who can flip from friend to friend, from event to event. They can start so many things. They aren't as faithful or dedicated to any one person or any one task. The phlegmatic loves their routine, while the sanguine loves the variety. You can be assured that once a phlegmatic has a routine, they will get very irritated if that routine is disrupted, whereas the sanguine is a little bit more go with the flow. They like the variety. They don't like being locked into a structure, a schedule, or a routine, whereas the phlegmatic loves their routine, but they don't like a highly rigid structure. So there's a fine difference between a structured schedule and a routine. You'll find that the phlegmatic is extremely practical. They're practical with their time and with their effort. They will cut corners to be practical because they don't like to waste their time, because if they're wasting their time, it's taken away from something that they love to do, which could be relaxing or eating food. Now, in the middle, you have the ego. The ego is what's going to bring balance and harmony to your four temperaments. It's this higher power that can help you bring out your good qualities and diminish the negative side of those good qualities, because every good quality is going to have a negative side. I've added 2 traits right to the center. Actually, there really should be 3 traits, and honestly, there could be more. I have sensitive, stubborn, and I really want to add emotional to the center, because all 4 temperaments share these 3 qualities. Now, their emotional qualities are going to look different. The emotional quality of a choleric is usually an outward expression of anger. The emotion of a sanguine is usually happiness and excitement. The melancholic tends to rest in the more sad emotions or grief, and they really sit with it for quite a long time. The phlegmatic doesn't know how to access the emotions very well, but through development, they certainly can. I do believe that phlegmatics are highly emotional as well. They're just so so buried deep. And as you go through experiences in life, you can start to relate to those emotions a little bit more. Now, each of the temperaments are also sensitive, but they are sensitive to different things. As human beings, I do believe that we are all sensitive, but how we react to those sensitivities, what those sensitivities are, and how we move through them will be different with each of the temperaments. And I have found that even the sanguine can be stubborn. In fact, the sanguine can be so stubborn because you cannot use logic to get them to do anything. And you have to really appeal to their sense of love and fun in order for them to do something that they don't want to do. You can see that the phlegmatic can be very stubborn if you try to disrupt their routine. The melancholic can be very stubborn if they're deep into a task that's detail-oriented, and the choleric can be stubborn as well unless you can logically convince them of something. Now, on the sides, I've added how each of these temperaments learn best. The choleric will learn from an instructor or a teacher or a parent who the choleric finds to be a quality, respected authority. If they find any weakness in the authority, they are not going to learn from them. They're not going to respect them. The melancholic will learn through the development of having sympathy. It does take a little while to develop that because they usually tend to be a little more focused on how other people made them feel. The phlegmatic learns through example and imitation, and so providing a suitable example for the phlegmatic is going to be the best way for them to learn. And the sanguine is going to learn from someone they love and from the person they receive love from. If they do not love their teacher or they don't feel that their teacher loves them, they are not going to be able to learn from them as effectively. Now, each of these temperaments has a dominant aspect to the self or the physical or the etheric or astral bodies. So I started to write this in a way that I wasn't very pleased with, so you're going to see me erase it and write it again. But the self dominates for the choleric as an adult. However, the self dominates for the child who is melancholic. So as you reach puberty, your temperaments are going to change and really solidify. As children, the temperaments are, as I've seen it described, a bit of a coat that they're wearing, a jacket. It's not really theirs yet. Now, we are teaching primarily to children, so whatever their temperament is as children, we really need to know how to teach to them in an effective way. But as they grow up, you're going to see that those temperaments change. So if the astral body dominates as a child, they will be choleric as a child and then sanguine as an adult, because the astral body will dominate as an adult as a sanguine, which is the air quality. And the etheric body as an adult, if it dominates, then you will be the phlegmatic temperament, which is associated to water. Now, these temperaments, the four elements, are historically very ancient. And that's why you can see these four elements of air, water, earth, and fire. So the physical dominates for the melancholic as an adult, the self dominates for the choleric as an adult, the astral dominates for the sanguine as an adult, and the etheric dominates for the phlegmatic as an adult. At this point, I want to add this magical fifth element right around the ego, right in the center, because it is this fifth element, the ego, if you're looking at it from this perspective, and if you're looking at it from a religious perspective, it can be a higher source that is that quintessential fifth element that allows you to bring harmony and balance between your four temperaments. Now, we are all four of the temperaments, but we do have a dominant temperament Generally, we have a subdominant temperament, and the third temperament we can associate with a little bit, and the fourth temperament seems like it's completely dormant. What we want to find throughout our life, throughout our development, is a balance between all four temperaments. Now, I do believe that whatever temperament you have as an adult, your dominant temperament will always be your default temperament, even if you find ways, if you find behaviors, if you find tricks or just ideas on how to bring balance to your temperament. I still think that your dominant temperament is going to always be your default, but we hope that our higher selves can bring balance to all four temperaments. And the way that we're going to soften the rough edges of our temperament and bring out the better qualities is in one of two ways. As children, placing like temperaments together will help soften the edges of those temperaments, and establishing really good habits that can carry through to puberty and adulthood are going to really help. You're going to find some really great qualities in your children that all of a sudden seem to disappear when they hit puberty. And you're going to want to, as an adult, do one of two things. Place yourself with other temperaments that are like you in order to soften the rough parts of your temperament. So that would be the potentially negative aspects of your temperament. Let's take the choleric, for instance, being impatient or frustrated or rigid. When you place them with other cholerics, they can soften that aspect of themselves. Let's take the melancholic or the phlegmatic, who tend to be a little bit more low energy and a little bit slow to start. We want to get to a point where you are a little bit more initiating. So when you place yourself with other phlegmatics or with other melancholics who are all slow, no one's going to start the conversation, no one's going to start the project, you find that your inner temperament that's a little bit more dormant, maybe your inner choleric that is really deep down in there and just hasn't had an opportunity to shine, all of a sudden really needs to be awakened when you're with other people who are just like you, where everyone is so slow moving. You need a little bit of that choleric to kind of get you going. So when you are with other adults, being with like temperaments can help soften the negative aspects of your temperament. However, being with aspiring qualities that you're striving for that you don't have, then you want to surround yourself with those kinds of people with the qualities that you're looking to have. And usually that takes some introspection in order to identify those good qualities and to strive for them. Now, the phlegmatic might have the easiest time since they do learn through imitation. And if they can identify what those good qualities are, if they are surrounded by those individuals, then they can start to learn them through example and include them within their own behaviors, within their temperament. So while we are all four temperaments, it does take time to develop those temperaments through our behaviors, through our examples, through imitation, through being with other people with the same temperament or with temperaments that you're trying to aspire to. So our raw temperaments need work. We're not leaning into the qualities that are not good. We are trying to develop those qualities. So for instance, a choleric who is a strong leader, we're not looking to diminish that leadership. We're looking to support that leadership through a good moral education, through compassion, through qualities that will help that person be a good leader. Now, a phlegmatic who loves their comfort and loves their routine, we're looking to enhance those qualities by having good routines and good habits. If you fall into bad habits, but they're your comfort as a phlegmatic, then you're not going to be able to grow to have those quality behaviors through good routines. And you can see that the sanguine might be super great at starting lots of projects, but fails in the follow through. And through development of that temperament, we want to bring about a little more stability for their follow through. And you can do that in several ways. Looking at food and education are two ways to help bring balance and harmony with the temperaments. So for instance, the sanguine, its go-to food would be sugar, since sugar is a high energy food that gives them calories right away. It will probably increase their activity and their hyperness. And so bringing about foods that are more slowly digested can help them retain some good energy, some grounding energy. And opposed to that, you have your melancholics and your phlegmatics, who tend to need a little bit more excitement, a little bit more energy, a little bit more motivation. And you can also find that through foods. The phlegmatic would do well with some citrus foods, which seem to awaken them a little bit. And the melancholics might do well with some warming foods and warming teas like cinnamon and ginger to provide warmth for their more cooler temperament. And the choleric, who already runs pretty hot, should avoid spicy food and warming foods, and instead think about things like melons or cucumbers or things that can bring a little more coolness to their temperament through their food. And in this way, we can seek balance with the temperaments in a number of ways. I hope that this brief look at the temperaments was helpful. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video, where you can find all of the graphics shown in this video. You can also find links to the resources that I used. You can find the link to that blog post in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how our temperaments are handling life, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.